Catus Maximus here again, this time with the Harbor Freight large and mini needle scalers, air needle scalers. Needle scalers are rapidly gaining popularity. They have been for several years, but more and more people become aware of these tools. And whenever you need to clean up paint, rust, debris, it's surprising. Clean up metal surfaces. And even stone, if you want to use it on stone, although it wears out the needles really badly. These are invaluable versus using wire wheels, sandpaper, sanders, all those other methods. The amount of material that you can remove with a needle scaler versus the life of the needles is totally unbeatable. Nothing can beat. You can just go into huge rusty areas. These are small. This is a larger one, and then industrially and from more professional manufacturers, you can get really huge versions of these. And they're just basically they magically make rust and paint and everything just disappear. And how they work is they just have a series of very hard steel pins. These are very long, like 6-inch long pins. And then inside here, there's just a mechanism that hammers against the back of the pins. There's a little carrier that holds them. And as it's hitting the pins, it's like an air hammer or an air chisel, except for you're using several pins at once. They kind of float around so they can get around contours and in the corners, and you just kind of draw with it, and you just go back and forth, and it just beats off paint and rust, and it's really just amazing how well these things work. And we can show you inside this little one here, if I can. I can't get the little one open. But let's take a look at the big one. There's the big difference between the two is the little one uses less air and is obviously almost 8 inches shorter. They both use the same size pins, and they do stock the pins. Here's the part number, 62483. And so if you buy either one of these, just immediately, if they have these in stock, they're always running out of these replacement pins because people use the beans out of these. And the pins last a long time, but if you're using these industrially for several hours a day, yeah, they'll wear down pretty fast. And they start to get rounded on the tips, and it's kind of up to you how far down you really want to wear the pins. Obviously, they have less play. Although you get a little more power. As the pins get shorter, they have less mass, and so it can get accelerated more. But definitely pick up a spare set of pins when you buy one of these, because you're inevitably going to need them. Every once in a while, a pin will get jammed somewhere and it'll get bent, and that's always annoying as well. And I don't have a big enough air compressor right where I'm doing these reviews, and these things are really noisy because they are basically an air hammer going really loud, pounding against the end of the pins, which are making all sorts of noise, and then whatever you're actually cleaning up is also making noise. These are not known for their low sound output, that's for sure. But to give you a little idea of how they really work, let's take a look here. I don't even have a hammer, I have a wrench. But what we do is you might have something like this here. I don't know why I chose this. This is a 6-inch C-clamp. It's actually not a quote-unquote C-clamp that you would find at a store. It's a structural clamp. It weighs 20 pounds for a 6-inch clamp. But if you just had something where you're just hitting little bits at a time, let's zoom in, it would just slowly hit and then chip off the paint. And I didn't hit that too hard because I didn't want to break it off. But that's exactly how these needle scalers work. All they do is just simply sit there and just hammer on the needles, and they just kind of break up the surface. So obviously if something's wet or has a plasticky paint coating, these won't work as well because they'll kind of just smush it around, and but anything brittle like standard kinds of paint and rust, they're just amazing. So we'll take a look at the large one. The large one is indeed large, uses a lot more air, but has a tremendous amount of power. In its full power mode, it really can just bounce. The whole tool almost launches off. Another thing to note is that this tool has an adjustable power level. And how the adjustable power level works, surprisingly enough, is the top setting is the lowest power level, where there's a lot of tension, and then you can adjust it into these step notches. There's a gap to take it apart, and then there's a final notch. And I'm not sure why they designed it quite like that. Maybe to avoid too much separation or make this lower part too flimsy. And all that does is adjust the spring tension, since there's a spring that causes these to retract and stay against the anvil. when you have it tighter and there's a lot more spring tension, then the air hammer has to work against a harder and tighter spring and delivers less energy. So when it's actually all the way extended, there's very little spring tension, so more energy from the air hammer gets delivered to the needles. And it's a little bit of a misnomer because this air hammer body is always hitting at the same amount of strength. It doesn't matter what this is doing. This is an easier one to take apart, so we'll take it apart this way. So it really is just an air hammer that has a special, very hard forged steel anvil. And it's just a flat disc, that's all it is, nicely reinforced. And the air hammer just hammers it back and forth. And then inside what we have, these things are always greasy, you got to keep them well oiled, is just a steel carrier, and then you have all the pins, which are literally pins with just smashed nubs so they don't fall out. And all that thing is doing is just hitting against the back of the pins, causing them just to bounce against the surface, and that's how they work. And it's actually super easy to replace needles and even bend them back if they do get bent on you. But that was essentially just a... Oh, and then of course, there's the spring that provides the tension. And they're obviously super simple and easy to rebuild. The smaller one just needs a wrench to take apart. Anyway, that was just about all there was for the needle scalers. They just end up working real great. And back to the C-clamp, and I forgot to mention, the biggest deal about these versus sanders is when you can just go back and forth across the surface like this. You can get into these tight areas with the needles. You can get down here, and they pretty much get into everything except for the very smallest of crevices. And it just blasts it all off. Then you use some air to clear it, and it's just amazing how these surface metal, basically, and the fact that they can just get into any type of area makes them pretty invaluable. So I highly recommend them. If you're ever in a situation where you're sanding or wire brushing metal, definitely consider a needle scaler. That's all I had for you on this video. Catus Maximus out. Please subscribe.